One careless moment destroyed the secret I'd spent 3 years protecting. I thought I had hidden everything, the long sleeves, the fake smiles, the excuses whenever someone asked if I was okay. Then my father saw the bruises. He wasn't supposed to. For 3 years, he believed every lie I told because I wanted to keep my family together. But the second he looked at my arm, his entire face changed.
He didn't yell.
He didn't ask questions. He quietly walked to the front door. And what happened over the next 24 hours changed my life forever. My name is Emily Carter, and I'm 24 years old. If you had met me 3 years ago, you probably would have called me cheerful. I laughed easily, loved weekend road trips, and never missed a family dinner. Today, people still think I'm doing fine because I've become an expert at pretending. Every morning, I stand in front of my mirror choosing clothes that cover as much skin as possible. Long sleeves in summer. Loose sweaters when everyone else wears t-shirts. If someone asks why, I smile and say I get cold easily. The truth is much harder to explain. For 3 years, I've hidden marks that told a story I wasn't ready to share. Every time I almost found the courage to tell someone, I convinced myself that staying silent would keep my family from falling apart. My father never noticed. He worked long hours running the construction company my grandfather had built. By the time he came home, he looked exhausted. He always asked if I was okay, and I always answered with the same practice smile. "I'm fine, Dad." He believed me every single time. Then there was my stepmother, Diane. In front of guests, she was warm, generous, and impossible not to admire. Behind closed doors, she had a way of making me feel small with sharp words, constant criticism, and quiet intimidation. I kept telling myself things would eventually get better. They never did. The next Saturday, our entire family gathered at my grandparents' house for my grandfather's 75th birthday. I had no idea that before the day was over, the secret I'd protected for 3 years would finally begin to unravel. Grandpa's birthday parties were always loud, warm, and full of laughter. My cousins chased each other through the backyard while my grandmother insisted everyone take another slice of pie. For a few hours, I almost forgot to be afraid. I stayed close to the kitchen, helping Grandma carry drinks outside. As I reached up to place a pitcher on the top shelf, the sleeve of my sweater slipped down farther than I realized. "Emily." My father's voice stopped me cold. I turned around and saw him staring at my arm. His smile disappeared. "What happened to your arm?" he asked quietly. Instinct took over. I pulled my sleeve back down and forced a laugh. "Oh, I bumped into a shelf at work." He didn't move. "You've never been a good liar," he said gently. The room suddenly felt too small. I could hear people laughing outside, completely unaware that my world had just started falling apart. Dad stepped closer, keeping his voice calm. "Sweetheart, let me see." I shook my head. "I'm fine."
He didn't argue.
He simply looked at me with the same patient eyes that had comforted me after every childhood nightmare. That was what finally broke me. The tears came before I could stop them. "I've been hiding them," I whispered.
His face tightened.
"For how long?" I covered my mouth, trying to stop crying, but the words escaped anyway. 3 years. The silence that followed felt endless. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't demand names. He simply closed his eyes for a moment, took one slow breath, and nodded. "I'll be right back," he said. Then he walked out of the kitchen. Through the window, I watched him cross the backyard alone. For the first time in 3 years, I wasn't terrified of the truth anymore. I was terrified of what my father was about to do next. Dad didn't come back into the kitchen right away. Instead, he spent the rest of Grandpa's birthday acting almost normal. He smiled when people spoke to him. He helped Grandpa carry gifts inside. He even laughed at one of my uncle's terrible jokes. But I knew my father. His silence was never empty. It meant he was thinking. Every few minutes, our eyes met across the room. He never looked angry. He looked heartbroken. That evening, after everyone went home, he knocked softly on my bedroom door. "Can we talk?" I nodded. He sat in the chair beside my window instead of beside me, almost as if he didn't want me to feel cornered. "I won't force you to tell me anything tonight," he said quietly. "But I need you to answer one question." I held my breath. Have you been carrying this alone all these years? I couldn't even speak. I simply nodded. He closed his eyes for a moment before whispering, I'm so sorry I didn't see it. The next morning, he didn't go to work. That alone shocked everyone. Instead, he began asking small, careful questions. He called Grandma and asked if she'd ever noticed changes in me. He spoke with Aunt Melissa, who remembered how often I'd canceled family outings at the last minute. He even looked through old family photos. In picture after picture, I wore long sleeves even at summer barbecues. How had no one noticed before? By late afternoon, Dad had filled an entire notebook with dates, memories, and questions. He wasn't trying to blame anyone. He was trying to understand everything I'd been too afraid to say. Just before dinner, he closed the notebook, picked up his phone, and sent one short message to the family group chat. Everyone, please come to my house tomorrow evening. We need to talk. Reading those words made my stomach twist. For the first time in years, the truth was no longer mine to carry alone. And somehow, that felt even more frightening than keeping it hidden. The next evening, everyone arrived looking confused. Grandma thought it was another family dinner. My aunt whispered that maybe Dad had exciting news about work. Even Diane walked in smiling, carrying a homemade dessert as though everything was perfectly normal. Dad waited until everyone had taken a seat. Then he stood.
His voice was calm.
Thank you for coming. I asked you here because there are things our family has ignored for far too long. The room fell silent. No one interrupted him. He placed a small notebook on the dining table. I've spent the last day putting together pieces that should have made sense years ago. He looked at me first, then at everyone else. I failed to notice how much Emily was struggling. That's something I'll regret for the rest of my life. My eyes filled with tears. Hearing my father blame himself hurt almost as much as everything I'd been carrying. Dad slowly opened the notebook. He spoke about the family gatherings I'd suddenly stopped attending, the excuses that never sounded like me, the photographs where I always hid behind oversized sweaters, and the conversations relatives had quietly shared with him over the past 24 hours. Nobody said a word. Finally, Diane crossed her arms. This is ridiculous, she said with a nervous laugh. Emily has always been dramatic. You're letting emotions cloud your judgment. Dad didn't argue. Instead, he looked directly at her. I'm not interested in arguments, he replied evenly. I'm interested in making sure my daughter feels safe, heard, and respected. Grandma lowered her head. Aunt Melissa wiped away tears. Even my uncle admitted. Looking back, there were signs. I just didn't understand them. For the first time in years, I wasn't the only person carrying the weight of silence. Dad closed the notebook. Then he made one final announcement. Emily won't be facing this alone anymore. Starting tonight, everything changes. No one questioned him. Because everyone in that room knew he meant every single word. Nobody argued with my father. Not because he raised his voice. Because, for the first time in years, everyone could see the pain I'd been hiding behind polite smiles. Dad walked over and sat beside me. He didn't ask me to explain anything in front of the family. Instead, he gently took my hand. You don't have to carry this by yourself anymore, he said. Those words broke something inside me. Or maybe they fixed something that had been broken for a very long time. Grandma wrapped her arms around me, crying quietly. I should have noticed, she whispered. Aunt Melissa squeezed my shoulder. We're here now, she said. And we're staying. For the first time in years, I believed those words. That evening, Dad made several decisions without hesitation. He rearranged the house so I would always feel comfortable and supported. He asked trusted relatives to check in with me regularly, not because I was weak, but because healing shouldn't happen alone. Over the next few days, our home felt different. The silence that had once filled every room was replaced with conversations. Real conversations. Dad apologized more than once, but I finally understood something. He hadn't ignored me because he didn't love me. He had believed the smile I showed him every day. Now that the truth was finally out, neither of us wanted to waste another moment pretending everything was fine. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. For the first time in 3 years, I didn't rehearse excuses in my head. I didn't worry about hiding behind another long-sleeve sweater the next morning. I simply closed my eyes. And I slept peacefully because I finally knew I wasn't facing tomorrow alone. The weeks that followed didn't erase the past. Healing never works that way. But little by little, life began to feel different. Dad started coming home earlier whenever he could. Every evening, we shared dinner without phones, television, or distractions. Sometimes we talked for hours. Other nights, we simply sat together in comfortable silence. For the first time in years, silence didn't frighten me. It felt peaceful. One Saturday morning, Dad knocked on my bedroom door, holding 2 cups of hot chocolate. "Want to go for a drive?" he asked. Just the two of us. We drove for miles with the windows down, talking about everything we'd missed over the last 3 years. My dreams, my fears, and the future I had almost convinced myself I didn't deserve. Slowly, I started saying yes to family dinners again. I laughed without forcing it. I stopped reaching automatically for long sleeves every morning. The fear that had once followed me everywhere began losing its grip. One evening, Dad smiled at me and said, "I'm proud of the woman you're becoming." For the first time in years, I believed him. And for the first time in even longer, I believed in myself too. Several months have passed since my father accidentally saw the bruises I had spent 3 years hiding. Looking back, I realized that moment didn't ruin my life. It saved it. For years, I believed protecting everyone else's peace meant sacrificing my own. I thought staying silent made me strong. I was wrong. Real strength began the day I finally stopped pretending. My father couldn't change the years we had already lost, but he made sure I would never have to face another day alone. If my story teaches anything, it's this. The people who truly love you don't expect you to suffer in silence. They want the chance to stand beside you, even when life feels overwhelming. And if this story touched your heart, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who may need a reminder that hope can begin with one honest moment. Because sometimes, one person finally seeing the truth can change everything.